is going to be the day that it doesn't, except that it did. Click.
It's great.
And we're live. It is Monday, February 22nd, 2021. Merrick Garland faced the Judiciary Committee, and we're going to talk about that a little bit later. But before we do that, Sarah Longwell has a huge announcement. We're going to do this announcement in the form of an interview. So let's just get right to it. There's not going to be a monologue today. I'm just going to say right away, we are not allowed to have fun anymore. In lieu of fun, we are allowed to have Sarah Longwell to make this big announcement of a new project that she and I are doing. And then Matthew Miller will join us to discuss the Garland nomination hearing. So, Sarah Longwell, what is a French village?
Okay, so a French village, if you don't listen to the Secret Podcast, is the best thing that I have watched over the last couple. It spans 2020, 2021. It's like 8 seasons, and the first 4 seasons have 15 episodes. It's like a total of 84 episodes, I think. It is I think I heard you describe it, Dusty, that it is one of the best shows about the Trump era that has nothing to do with Trump, and yet is not. Actually, I should back up just 1 second. It is about a French village during the World War II Nazi occupation.
Okay, your audio is a little bit off, Sarah, and we're.
I know.
Do you have a headset?
Some AirPods for when's your birthday, Sarah Longwell? We should celebrate.
It's soon. I do have AirPods. This is a nice.
See, now you sound fine.
You could just speak up, or really just speak up a little. I think it'd be okay.
You'd think it's just that I'm too quiet. See, this is what happened before. How do I sound now? Do I sound normal or not?
Better, but it's doing a weird lilting thing.
Yeah, you're kind of coming in and out.
Down a little. It just kind of dips, the volume quality.
Should I get my headset?
Yeah.
Oh.
Get the headset.
Go get it. But so hold on. I thought a French village was une ville.
Well, so there is this is quote a French village unquote,
yeah,
as opposed to une ville, right?
Okay. That's my dorky. I took French for 7 years. And
yeah, I see what you did there, Kate.
I know.
How does this sound?
You sound fabulous.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
Much better.
Great.
Oh, man. So
tell
us about this show. Is this a new show for me to watch, Sarah?
So this is a show from 2014, which is when it started airing in France. But it began airing last year. It's on Amazon Prime. And yes, it should be a show that you watch. It is. So it's about this. It's a fictional village in France that is on the Swiss border. It's occupied by the Germans, and the thing is I've been trying to get a lot of people into this show, and they say they don't want to watch it because they don't want to watch a show about Nazis or about World War II, and it's not really about. It's not like you have to. It's not like watching 84 episodes of Schindler's List. I would never. I would not sign up for that show.
I hide the knives if you decide to do that.
Yeah, it's just all the Nazi porn that's out there is that's not really what I'm into. What I love about this show is that it is about people in France who are occupied against their will. They've lost the war. The Germans are in their town. And there's various ways in which our characters are navigating this. Some of them are complicit. Some of them are sort of actively participating because there's benefits to them, because they're business people. Some of them ultimately go on to become parts of the resistance. Some of them are bad. They're bad. They look for ways they ultimately get sort of pulled into the evilness of the Nazis and do evil things themselves, but you see the evolution. But all the stuff that's happening in terms of concentration camps and all that stuff is done elsewhere, and you never see it. That is not what you're seeing, and you're also not seeing a lot of active war, which makes it different. So it is much more about people navigating this situation in which their lives are often imperiled, or where they're being sort of forced into this terrible situation to be accomplices in terrible things, and it's about the calculations that they make.
Yeah.
So what's interesting to me about this is it's about people more than it is about World War II or Nazis. It is about people and how they navigate making, like, it's a meditation on complicity, and then ultimately a meditation on accountability.
And morals,
because it really
and
does
evolution of morals, and kind of like,
But here's
like a series of trolley problems.
But here's the critical thing. Once Sarah started watching this show, so Sarah does twice a week this podcast that used to be called The Secret Podcast because it was secret, and now is called The Secret Podcast because it is not secret, with Jonathan Last. And once Sarah started watching French Village, everything that happened in the news, this became her reference point for it, which is uncomfortable because Sarah, like me, does not, and like Mike Godwin, who's presumably somewhere in the audience, does not like Nazi comparisons. And so, and yet, you would have these increasingly frequent conversations between Sarah and John Last in which Jonathan would say, the following happened, and so was, and Sarah would break in and say, it was kind of like in French Village when X happened and Y happened. And over time, she wore me down. And I went from, I'm not watching a Nazi show as an analog for the Trump era because I don't like Nazi comparisons too. Okay, I'm going to watch the first episode of this. And I watched the first episode of this, which is really hard to watch, by the way, because a plane strafes a bunch of children. And I can handle a lot in the way of, unpleasant stuff. But like planes strafing children kind of do it for me. But the analogy that she is talking about is apparent immediately as the Germans march into this village and people start having to decide immediately, for very good reasons in all kinds of directions, how they're going to handle the situation and what they're going to do. And I see Mike Godwin is here, and I just want to say to Mike Godwin, this is entirely outside of Godwin's law, because this is not accusing anybody in the chat of being a Nazi. This is actually an exploration of real Nazis and
it's also not a discussion on the internet. Mike Godwin doesn't Godwin's law doesn't go outside of the internet discussions, or going toward always end in someone comparing someone to Hitler.
I just want to say, I like it. We are outside of Godwin's law here. So, but there's another step to this important development, which is that for the entirety of this period in which Sarah and JVL have been talking about this show, Sarah has been trying to get JVL to watch the show and to do a podcast with her while he watches it. She will rewatch it. They will discuss it in light of contemporary affairs, also on its own terms. And I've never figured out what is JVL's resistance to this idea, other than that you won't hike the Appalachian Trail with him.
Yeah,
and by hike the Appalachian Trail, I mean literally hike the Appalachian Trail.
I was
that's not a metaphor.
Worried for a second. I was like, Sarah,
no.
JVL to tell us.
JVL wants to hike the Appalachian Trail with his good friends, and Sarah's like, no, there are no bathrooms. We're not going to hike the Appalachian Trail. It's not a reference to running off to Argentina together. But why is he resistant to this idea?
Here's the thing. JVL.
Sorry. Freezing.
It's okay. JVL is, as we say on the Secret Podcast, he's my best friend, but he's full of contradictions. He says he's always right. He's actually wrong quite often. One of the ways in which he is full of contradictions is that he insists that we
Get
must
yourself
hike
a
the
best friend like Sarah Longwell.
Yeah, seriously. won't tell him I'm negging him on this podcast. Actually,
Yeah, we won't tell him. It's only broadcast
Yeah,
all over the internet.
don't tweet at him or anything about it.
So he's this.
Oh my
So he's
God.
like, we should hike the Appalachian Trail together. Like, if you were really my best friend, you do that with me. And my response is, you have 4 children. I have 2 children. They're all of young age. Like, nobody's letting us go for like weeks long. I mean, to hike the
4
Appalachian Trail
children
months.
is like a real commitment to children. I feel like it's like
I will tell you, 2 children feels like quite a commitment. And like nobody has spouses that are signing up for this, for us to just be gone for months at a time so we can go find ourselves in the Appalachian Trail. Okay, so he's peeved that I won't do that with him. But then when I'm like, you have to watch The French Village, it's very applicable to everything that we're discussing on our podcast. He's like, no, I got 4 kids. Like, how am I supposed to find time to watch this show? And I'm like,
he just wants to
Alright,
hike
dude.
with you in a couple bags of wine up and down like that.
So,
yeah.
the big punchline is the other day, Sarah and I are texting because she has finally convinced me. She hasn't actually been lobbying me, but listening to her for the last 3-4 months has convinced me, all right, well, I'm going to watch The French Village. I mentioned this on Rational Security, which a bunch of you have heard. And I told you I would report back on whether it was in fact the greatest thing since sliced bread, or whether Sarah was just blowing smoke up your asses. I have not determined yet that it is the greatest thing since sliced bread. I have determined that Sarah is not blowing smoke up your asses. And I informed Sarah of this, and she mentioned, by the way, if you want to do a podcast about French Village, that option is on the table. And I stupidly said something like, sure.
Good, Ben. You're not overcommitted to like podcasts.
Yeah, because I
I
don't do enough weekly podcasts. So on Friday, we are recording our first episode of French Village. What are we calling this podcast, by the way?
Can I watch?
Great.
I don't want to be on the podcast, but can I watch and occasionally come in with strong opinions?
Yeah.
Definitely, absolutely. And I will tell you that one of the reasons I really want to do a podcast about the show is that I don't just unequivocally stand for this show. Like, there's a lot about it that has caused me to think hard and that I think is incredibly relevant. There's also a bunch of things that I think are stupid. Like, it is pretty soapy. There's a lot of like love affairs in this French Village, and it occasionally like whole characters that had story arcs previously go missing, and not because of Nazis, just because the writers like didn't need them for a while. So like I have things I want to talk through. So anyway, I'm super excited about this podcast, but I know that you do like a polling question, so I'm going to throw out a few names that I think would be good for this podcast. Okay, so
What
number 1 is,
should we call the French Village? Not Villains. Village podcast. All right, number 1.
Le Podcast.
All right, number 2.
Number 2.
Oh God, that's really good.
Rempart, which is French for bulwark.
Ah, good.
No, too subtle.
How about Cruella de Village?
No. I know.
I mean, you can use it as an option. I'm not gonna.
I'm putting it in.
Okay.
Oh God.
Others?
I'm so
Other
laughing
option?
about Le Podcast. It's really funny because did you know like France is like really actually very strict about their language, and so like there's all of these words that they just, when like technology happened, they just adopted from the English until they could come up with their own word, and then they banned the use of certain words on like French like radio and things like that.
How about
It Takes a French Village. I saw.
Oh, good.
Oh my God.
Nice.
That was on our original list, but somebody else brought it up here. Here's the one thing I would say is that the themes of this show are extremely serious, and so I do think that we
The
probably
joy of French Village. Sorry.
Like, no, I don't think that, like, I'm not sure how it would land. Like, once we get into it, I think if we have like a funny, jokey title, I think we may find ourselves being like, I feel weird about this. I
Yeah,
feel like
because
not
it's
good
like
about
too
our
much
jokey.
downerness.
Isn't it
Okay.
the art of
Yeah.
French Village?
Oh yeah, you're right. It is the art.
Yeah,
Wait, what is this? It's the joy of cooking, and then
Yeah,
it's,
it's
like
the art of French Village. You've
merged.
merged the joy of cooking with
I
the
know.
art of French cooking with the joy of sex.
I
So they've
know.
kind of all
Oh.
mashed together.
I
French Village people. That's good.
French.
Yeah, so it's like
but I get
that's
it.
one of those where it's like funny, but like it's funny to us. But I just like as we talk about
No, you have to
the
Right.
separate
reaction
The
people,
more
we may
people
find
get
ourselves-
killed, the less good
And the
taste it's
less-
going to
yeah.
seem.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
Well,
let's
then you
have
could
one
really be like in lieu of.
in lieu of good taste.
It could be like in Louvre. Like.
That's
or
very
something.
silly. Yeah.
Uh,
How about
sorry.
one serious option, just to give people the. All right, we're going to give one purely descriptive.
I think the Rampart. See, you guys dismissed it.
You like
but,
the
No,
Rampart.
no.
Yeah.
It's in there. All right, we have a bunch of options up there.
Scott Shapiro chimes in with the Bummer podcast.
Scott Shapiro should join this podcast.
I
We
know.
should have a philosopher on the
I
podcast.
know. There would be like
Um,
it's all like tiny little.
But here's the thing, Ben. I'm conscious of your time. I'm conscious of my own time, and it could be as simple as you watch one season and then we talk about a whole season. Like, it doesn't have to be every week.
No,
We
I
actually
think
have,
it's
like,
I think it's 2 episodes a week, and then it's 2 episodes a week. Record for half an hour on Friday.
It's
No
literally
prep.
like the serious thing here. Watching A French Village. That was
Yeah.
what you came up with is the serious title for the podcast. Like, what?
French
Like,
Village people is doing awfully well. I gotta say. I mean, we may just have to go with that.
I'm telling you, you will not like that later. You will regret that choice.
Okay,
That's
Well,
just
we'll
how it is.
we'll
a
revisit
surprising
this.
number of the French Village people will be dead, murdered by each other and by the Germans.
How to watch TV and be sad about it with Sarah Longwell.
All right, so are we recording on Friday? Episodes 1 and 2?
You tell me, bro. I'm up
It's-
for it. I've watched them. I've seen
Yeah,
it.
no, I've watched episodes 1 and 2, so I'm good to
Okay.
go. And I can comfortably watch 2 episodes a week. There can't be that many murders in 2 episodes a week. And
You are aware it's like Nazis.
I am aware, but I'm also aware it's a small town and there
Okay.
aren't that many people in it, and you got to keep your characters alive if you're going to have 7 or 8 seasons. So I think I think I'm comfortable with 2 episodes a week.
Great. Excellent.
I'm so excited. I want to do this with somebody and watching like Buffy the Vampire Slayer for the first time and then talking to them about it. You could do a hell of a
You should do that.
Really?
That would.
No
I
one
think you
wants
would
that
have a huge-
content, Sarah. Like, that's only me.
You,
I
Mike
think you're wrong.
Godwin, and Michaela Fogel
But
should
like
do the
wait,
Buffy.
no, we're all super fans, so this wouldn't be as fun because we'd just be talking in our own little language and referencing shit all the time, and like it wouldn't be as good. I mean, they would be great on it if we found some innocent victim that wanted to watch Buffy for the first time.
Do you know how many more people watch Buffy the Vampire Slayer than will ever watch The French Village? Like the universe of people we are doing our podcast for versus.
Can I
Buffy
also just
podcast?
talk about all of the good TV that I don't watch, like Le Bureau, because like I do not have like the bandwidth to stare at a screen and read subtitles. Like after a long day of staring at a screen and reading like everything. And so like I just don't like, that's why I haven't, like, people are like going nuts about Le Bureau. Like there's a whole bunch of stuff I haven't watched because it's subtitled. It makes me feel very unsophisticated. But yeah. Oh, Shane has never watched Buffy? Ooh. Oh my God, that would be so fun. God.
Can I just can I
Yes.
just say one thing about the subtitles though? It's actually because it's important, which is much to my wife's dismay, I have become somebody who watches shows while reading Twitter and like sometimes
Yes.
while tweeting, which means that I am only ever half engaged anymore.
Yes.
These subtitles make you engage. I am not certain that I didn't like The French Village better than most of the things that I've watched because I was forced to like immerse myself in it.
Yeah.
I don't even notice subtitles anymore. I mean,
Oh
there's
yeah,
been
you're just a man of all languages.
No,
now.
no. There has been a lot of talk in the chat about Babylon Berlin, which, if you've never watched, is a fucking amazing. And it's about sort of late Weimar Berlin. It's a police drama, and it is fabulous. I think like one of the great things about this era of television is just the amount of great non-English language television that gets streamed that we get to see as a result of it. So I
mean, I put on subtitles. I'm just going to be totally clear. Like, I put on subtitles for all UK shows I watch. I put on anything with like a southern dialect. I have to put on, like, I put it on for The Wire. I put it on for like, I just like, unless it's like some type of, I mean, I just like kind of always put on subtitles. It's just kind of nice. It's actually funny how much you miss, and little jokes and stuff. But
so
anyway.
Sarah, we are bringing in Matt Miller to talk about the Merrick Garland hearing. But before you vanish in a puff of smoke, where will this be available and when?
Matt has entered the chat. I can hear the feedback.
I just muted him.
So we are going to do this as a Bulwark. It is a Bulwark Cinematic Universe offering. And you'll find it wherever you find your favorite Bulwark podcast, which is on our website.
That's super
and if you're
cool.
Yeah, it's about time Ben and I did a podcast together.
It
Kate,
is.
You and I can do one together on some other topic.
Yeah, it'd
I've
be
decided
fun.
to give my life over to just podcasting.
It is like, it's kind of like this weird extroverted social, if you like, you do it right, it's like the show, which just doesn't feel, I mean, it is definitely work. Like, I'm not going to say that it isn't, and Ben does most of it because he runs like the back end of everything. But like,
which is
it's
great when I'm at the cabin in the woods with no internet.
But there's like, but I will say that like, I love it. It's like, it feels like you're producing content from like smart friends and smart people that kind of get together, and then other people can like learn from their smart conversations, and I think it's fun. It's great. I'm like, would love to, I'm like very eager to like hear what you guys have to say about this show and to watch it. This is going to be really fun for me.
All right, Sarah, do you have do you want to stick around for a Merrick Garland discussion, or do you want to vanish in a puff of smoke?
I'm going to vanish. I just want to say hi to Matt. I haven't seen, last time I saw Matt, I was with him on a studio set. And so it's nice to see you again. You look very handsome, very dressed up for Ben Wittes's and Kate show here.
I feel like I didn't get the memo. I thought we were supposed to wear ties here and dress formally.
Liar.
I know.
See you later, Sarah.
All right.
Bye,
See you
Or
guys.
specifically, see you on Friday, or hear you on Friday.
I'll see you
Good
on the
seeing
internet,
you.
Sarah. Matt, you have a plant that has like a tendril that is a lot longer than the last time I saw.
Oh, this one?
You.
Yeah. It keeps going. I have this one that's doing very well, and if you see over my
Yeah,
left
I saw,
shoulder,
is that an orchid? That's beautiful.
it's a poinsettia that was when I bought it in December, was a very full poinsettia, and it came with instructions for how to keep them through and when to move them outside and how to make them last till next year, and it is on its way to being fully dead. So,
Well,
But you can't tell from here.
Yeah.
you can't tell from here.
at
It looks
all.
good. Yeah, well, it's almost dead.
And
I've just about killed
nice
it.
Tie. I'll get a tie. I can do that. I'll like so you don't feel alone.
Matt is actually wearing a tie because he was just on MSNBC, which is why he is not was not with us at the top of the hour. So, Matt, what do you think of the hearing today?
I mean, do I have to answer that, or can I talk about Babylon Berlin? I love that show.
Babylon Berlin was great.
It's
wasn't it?
It's very good.
Although
Yeah, I
the
love
last
that show.
season was much less good.
Yeah, I agree with that. No, I loved it. My wife and I, all through quarantine, have been watching foreign shows because in the absence of the ability to travel, being able to watch a show set in Italy or France or Germany is the next best thing. But anyway, it's not what you invited me on for. I thought to hear.
We're just here to.
Oh, look at that!
Yeah,
Sharp.
This is John's
I'm not putting
favorite
on a tie.
terrible tie. It's like I try to keep throwing it away. It's a Jerry Garcia tie. It's real bad. He's John's colorblind, so he like doesn't know some of these things sometimes. Yeah.
I thought the hearing was reassuringly normal, almost even dull and boring, the way you want your confirmation hearings to be. I mean, the way you want your confirmation hearings to be if you're the nominee or the people working on that nominee's team, you want them to be boring because boring usually wins. Boring confirmation hearings are good. You don't want your hearings blowing up like, say, the Michael Mukasey confirmation hearing did. It was a very boring hearing for a long time and then became very unboring and almost sunk his nomination. And I thought, I was about to say reassuring, but the thing about AG confirmation hearings is there is a formula. There are words you go up and say, which is I will be independent and I will, if the president orders me to do something inappropriate, I will resign. And every AG nominee knows what those words are. They all go up and say them, and the test is whether they will live up to those words. Bill Barr said all the same things in his hearing. If you go back to his hearing, he said all the right words. He talked about how this was he's sort of at the end of his career, and he wasn't beholden to anyone. He didn't need this job. Didn't have any reason to kowtow to the president. Of course, all that turned out to be very much not the case. So I happen to believe Merrick Garland is a very different person and will behave very differently. But I thought that, he was kind of calm and in command all day, I thought.
So I actually thought the hearing was remarkably substantive in a boring sort of way.
Yeah.
I mean, he had a discussion with Ben Sasse about the nature of executive discretion that was quite good, and it was good on Sasse's part as well, in that Sasse I don't think was driving at any partisan point and he had a series of exchanges with people about policy areas that were pretty forthcoming, that were and I'm curious, do you think that's a creature of the fact that Republicans made a decision that they are not gunning for this guy, and so they don't approach it from a you must answer this question or my vote hinges on it, which frees him up then to have some serious conversations?
Sort of. I would frame it slightly differently. I think they made a decision not to go after him, but they made the decision not to go after him. It wasn't a strategic decision. We're going to, not oppose Garland, and we're going to, train our fire somewhere else. They made a decision not to go after Garland because they couldn't find a good way to go after him. There's sort of lack of opportunity. They don't have, he's been on the bench for a long time. He hasn't been out speaking publicly, taking positions on controversial issues. His last position in government where it was in the 1990s. And the thing he's most famous for is something that is, unimpeachable by pretty much anyone, the Oklahoma City bombing case. So you see this a lot of times in confirmation hearings when you have a witness that is somewhat unassailable. The senators, they kind of know that going in, and you will especially see it in the room where they realize that there's no upside to them in taking him on. And you can see it especially when someone like Ted Cruz kind of is not throwing his hardest punches. It's because he realizes that exchange is not going to go well for him. It's not because he thinks...
because it was National Margarita Day.
Yeah, maybe.
You see?
It's usually they decide. Yeah, it's usually they decide that it's not an exchange that they can win. Not it's a nominee that they're basically okay with.
So, serious question, really quickly. Was this some type of, did you see it in any way as a test run for flagging issues that they're going to want to preserve if he has another type of confirmation hearing in the future, or no?
No, I don't think there's another confirmation hearing for him in the cards.
Okay.
There was one magic moment when he could get a Supreme Court nomination, and that was the last one. And any other time, I think he would be considered to be too old, frankly.
He's too old and too moderate.
I agree.
And too male and too white.
Yep.
And I think that combination, any two of those four is probably overcomable, but being all four is not. And he's 68 or something?
Yeah.
I mean, Biden shouldn't nominate a 68-year-old.
Yeah. He get confirmed without a hearing if he was nominated. The Republicans would be happy to confirm him.
Yeah, they'd be like so happy. No, I mean, it's a good point. I just was kind of curious, like if there's any type of discussion of that. Like I was assuming that it was off the table, but yeah.
No, but not for a confirmation hearing. But in confirmation hearings, senators do put down markers and try to commit, get them to commit to things that they will come back to later, or that they will, to try to, so this will not be his last appearance before this committee. The Attorney General is supposed to show up once a year for an oversight hearing, although as Senator Durbin pointed out, Chairman Durbin, nice to say, pointed out, they haven't had an oversight hearing in 3 years because Graham never called Barr up for one, somewhat shocking. So you will see them, try to lay traps and get they know, the senators know that the most forthcoming an attorney general is ever going to be is when they're a nominee for attorney general, and they're trying not just to win votes, because look, he knows he's going to get confirmed, but no one wants to be confirmed with 50 votes plus one, the vice president. You want to have as many votes as possible. You want to be confirmed as quickly as possible, and Republicans can delay that a bunch of ways if they want to. So you are the most forthcoming and the most forward. You'll lean furthest in their direction at your confirmation hearing, and so they're going to try to get you on record on things that then, when you don't live up to them as AG in your next hearing, they can throw your own words back in your face. And interestingly, he, despite that, I think in a few cases was not willing to commit to things that they wanted to do. He was kind of, with Durham especially, he was kind of, no, I'm not going to make the commitments that you want me to.
A lot of cases. I mean, there were a bunch of areas where he stopped short of saying what they wanted to hear, and in some cases they were okay with that, and in some cases they weren't. Let's talk about the Durham situation. This was, I think, the first question Grassley asked him. It came up repeatedly over the course of the day, and I thought his answer was quite reasonable. And the Democratic senators missed a very fundamental aspect of the exchange that I thought was sort of inexcusable on either their parts or their staff's parts, on both. So Grassley asks him at the outset, Bill Barr committed to letting Mueller finish his work and making sure he had the resources and support necessary to do his work. Will you give the same commitment vis-a-vis John Durham? And Garland said, I can't answer that question without being briefed on the case, knowing the facts of the investigation. And Grassley found this an unsatisfying answer, and Republican senators came back over the course of the day to this several times, saying, asking him again to give the same commitment that Bill Barr gave vis-a-vis Mueller. He continued to refuse to do it. I suspect he will lose a couple of votes over this, particularly Tom Cotton and maybe Ted Cruz, and the people who want to look for a way to vote against him. This is their best text. I was kind of pulling my hair out during these exchanges, because it seems to me that at one point Durbin came in and said, hey, this is kind of unreasonable, but he never laid out how different this situation was from the Mueller situation that Barr was being asked about. So my first question is, number one, is the parallel here a reasonable one? And number two, if not, what are the major differences? Why is it, if it's reasonable for to expect Barr to have given assurances about Mueller and not reasonable to expect Garland to give assurances about Durham, given that they're appointed under the same reg, right? They're subject to the same removal order. What's the difference?
I mean, the difference is that one of the investigations is bullshit. The Durham investigation. I mean, fundamentally, look, one of the investigations, the Mueller investigation, was an investigation into whether a foreign government tried to interfere in our election with the assistance, the encouragement of the now president of the United States, and whether the president of the United States then tried to cover up that investigation. And the other investigation is an attempt, the Durham investigation is an attempt to discredit that probe. I think, the where we make a mistake is falling into, we have to think about them as the same. We have to pretend that this Durham investigation is on the level, when fundamentally we know it's not on the level. They are formally the same, but one, frankly, is bullshit. And I believe the Durham investigation was bullshit. It was started as bullshit by the Attorney General to try to discredit his own department's work because he didn't believe in it. And look, what does that investigation have to show for itself after, I think it's been around for 2 years now? One case that was investigated by the Inspector General and referred to it, in which they got probation. I mean, they've done nothing else. And I think if I were, on the committee, the point I'd make is, no matter what line of, crap you've been fed from Sean Hannity every night for the last 2 years, these investigations are fundamentally not the same. And if the Attorney General gets into office and finds that the Durham investigation is as flimsy and as ill-predicated as it looks to all of us on the outside, then he ought to fire him. Now, he won't, because that would be a political scandal that's not, or a controversy that's probably not worth it, given what that investigation is likely to yield at the end. But that, Garland doesn't have to say that. That's what I would say if I were a senator on the committee.
Yeah.
It's also why I'll never be a senator.
Can I so Garland? You agree with me? Garland can't say that.
No, of course not. Yeah.
And actually, it's awkward for Dick Durbin to say that too.
Yeah.
How do you actually end up writing the history of that into the Justice Department, though? Like, to delineate that was bullshit, so that, like, when people look back on this, they don't make this false equivalency.
Well, it kind of depends on what the report yields, or what the investigation yields. I say report. We have no reason to believe that Durham is going to want to write a report at the end, or that he's going to want that report to be public. So that's the first thing. It depends, where Durham is. I mean, we have no idea. There was, a little bit of rumbling at the end that Durham was, that Barr was pushing Durham to do something before the election, and Durham was resisting, and Nora Danahy, resigning, when she did, his top assistant may have had something to do with it. We don't really know, but look, the Attorney General can reject any employee that in the Justice Department that comes up with a decision that the Attorney General disagrees with. The Attorney General can reject. I mean, Durham's authority is delegated from him.
So can I suggest that, like, but this investigation that I don't know the details of is bullshit, while almost certainly true, is a speech that Dick Durbin couldn't make, but that there was a speech that he could make that gets you to the same outcome without the awkwardness that and I share your prejudgment of the investigation, but I don't think you're allowed as a senator to say that, at least not without a lot of how do you know that you can't. Sorry?
Let me just challenge you real quick. The Republican senators went around for several years calling a completely lawful, appropriate, serious investigation bullshit. I don't know why Democratic senators can't call a bullshit investigation bullshit.
People.
Because there should be a certain amount of discipline about presuming regularity. And I as I say, I share your presumption. There's something highly irregular about it, but it is a lawfully constituted investigation that. But look, let me give the speech that I think Durbin should have given today, instead of the mealy-mouthed one that he gave, and just see which part of it you don't think works. Number one, these situations are completely different. We knew what Bob Mueller was investigating. We knew what he was investigating because he had brought major indictments laying out a major Russian conspiracy to hack our elections and to engage in massive social media manipulations. He had a record of prosecutions of U.S. persons and non-U.S. persons, and we knew that he was at the end of his investigation because he had been, like the Justice Department had actually been quite clear about that. Number two, the president was actively threatening to fire him. And so the question was on the table, would Bob Mueller be able to finish his investigation? Not only is nobody threatening to fire John Durham, the president fired all the other U.S. attorneys in the country save two, both of whom were conducting these politically sensitive investigations, one of whom was John Durham. There's no threat to John Durham. Number three, when Bill Barr was asked about John Durham, about Bob Mueller, he was known to have written a memo to the president urging the curtailment of a major part of this investigation, that is the obstruction component. So the idea that this man might not follow the regs that guarantees the independence and function of was not a crazy conspiracy theory. It was suggested right there in the memo that Barr himself had written. There is no comparable reason to doubt Merrick Garland's ability to supervise reasonably John Durham's investigation. And number four, and finally, and this gets to your point that the Durham investigation is bullshit, the Durham investigation began as an internal review, which is that Bill Barr wanted to do some journalism, and find out whether his conspiracy theories were true. It developed a criminal predicate only at the point at which Kevin Kleinsmith's, the IG reported on Kevin Kleinsmith. And by the way, nobody knows what the continuing criminal predicate for it is to this day. And so, to the extent that a reasonable attorney general coming in might have questions, what is this investigation even about? That is not a question with an obvious answer in the public record. What's wrong with that as the reason why Merrick Garland might give a different answer than Bill Barr?
Yeah, I think that's all fine. The only thing I would say is I wouldn't say there's no threat to Durham. I would say all of that, and with your last point about the problems with the Durham investigation, if I were him, I'd tell him, look, I've had real problems with this investigation. I'm concerned about the statement that Durham put out that we found out later was misleading about an ongoing investigation. I'm concerned that his top deputy resigned, reportedly because she was being pressured to do things she found inappropriate. I'm concerned that the Attorney General was flying all over the world with Durham to investigate things. I'm concerned that he was looking at things that are beyond the remit of a prosecutor, specifically how intelligence agents make intelligence judgments. So I'm not telling you what to do. We're going to confirm you because we think you can exercise the appropriate judgment of the Attorney General. But if you get in there and you think this investigation is not predicated and should be shut down, I hope you won't keep it alive just because a bunch of Republican senators have asked you to, when all they're after is a political exercise. I would try to give him a little space to do what he thinks is right. He's not going to not go in and fire Durham, I don't think. But I would, the problem we have over and over when it comes to the Justice Department and how Democrats and Republicans behave is Republicans push for completely inappropriate things. Democrats say just follow the law. And what happens is the Justice Department, under both Democrats and Republicans, bends the Republican way because I mean Republicans on the Hill, because they're worried about criticism. Saw Lynch do it, saw Comey do it. saw obviously this Justice Department do it. Rosenstein was doing it all the time, doing things he shouldn't have done to head off criticism.
But
And
like,
so
I don't. What do you? I'm like, I just want to push back a little bit, and this is not my purview at all. But just from like an outsider's perspective, that just seems to be the general way of things. Like there is a no holds bar approach to no pun intended to like kind of the Justice Department and like Republican politics and the right. Like they do whatever it takes. They say untrue things in the press. They slander people. They like, they're just, and then there's kind of like the Democrats come back into power and we have exactly what we've had now, which is like the most reasonable kind of like confirmation hearing that we've had in a while. And I just kind of want to like, what are they supposed to do? Like, isn't the entire idea of things that they live on, that like we are the party of principle in some type of way? Like, at some point, like, isn't that what should be happening instead of continuing to accelerate the game of like complete insane political gamemanship?
It's tough. There's no. I will say I've thought a lot about this. There is no one answer. I don't think you want to accelerate the game, but at the same point, you can't refuse to play a game that the other side is playing. Right? You can't just kind of leave the field and let them control the game, which is, I think, what kind of I think was the story of the Clinton email.
Well, you just changed the locks of the Senate doors. But no, I'm serious. No, you're right. I think that's right.
It's you have to. What I think you have to do is you have to pressure the Justice Department in an appropriate way. You have to be in their face all the time. The biggest lesson for me about this was after the Comey speech, in July of 2016, slamming Hillary Clinton. Everyone agrees now it was inappropriate, although few did at the time. And I say few did because he got summoned up to the Hill, and the Democratic Party was the aggrieved party at that point. Their nominee had been savaged by the FBI director. He got summoned up to the Hill and got the hell beat out of him by Republicans who beat the hell out of him for not charging her, while Democrats were praising him. The things were completely reversed from how the political dynamic was reversed from reality.
I don't recall John Cornyn at that time
no, of course
being
not.
too upset about the treatment of Hillary Clinton.
And it gave him both the space and gravity pulled him towards trying to do other things to ameliorate their criticism over the next 6 months. And so Democrats, I think, have to be appropriately critical of Justice Department activities that they think are inappropriate. And they have to call it.
I want to ask you about a different aspect of today's hearing, which I'm sure gave you flashbacks in your capacity as Eric Holder's chief spokesman, which is there was a side of the Republican questioning today that was like, the last 4 years didn't happen at all. And
totally.
we are still upset about the weaponization of the Justice Department in the Fast and Furious investigation and it's like there's a straight line narratively between. They didn't talk about the IRS. What's her name?
Cruz did. No, Cruz did.
He did?
Cruz did, yeah. Which, by the way, was not the IRS.
Was not a Justice Department thing,
but
never mind. You got your IRS, you got Fast and Furious, you got, weaponization of the department, targeting political opponents, in the form of Carter Page and how Hillary Clinton's email fits into this is completely opaque. But
Operation Choke Point was what Cruz brought up, which was the department's effort to go after payday lenders. But okay.
So, it's like it's like the last 4 years didn't happen, and every kind of tendentious criticism of, and there are some totally legitimate criticisms of Holder and Loretta Lynch, but these are not among them, and I found myself watching this and saying, do they actually believe this? Right? Do they actually believe that the problem of politicization of the Justice Department reached its apex under Eric Holder, right, and Loretta Lynch, with their attack dog Jim Comey, or is this an argument? Is this an example of, completely false consciousness, or is it an example of argument in bad faith?
So this is the same.
I wonder what you think, Ben.
Yeah.
I don't know, honestly. I really don't.
This is the same question you can ask about voter fraud or climate change, or go down the list of issues. Do the Republicans that say these things really believe them, or are they just operating in bad faith? And I think it's a mix, and ultimately doesn't really matter. It doesn't. What does it matter?
Well, so I think
agree that there's like such a postmodern realization, like what
I
you
think-
say
what
is
does it
the
matter?
reality of
No,
things.
I think it does matter in this case. Maybe it does. Maybe
Whether
it
they're
doesn't matter in
salvageable or
the case
not? Which is worse?
No. Here's why I think it matters. Because now you're Merrick Garland, and you're walking into that building, and half of the world, 60% of the world, I'm not sure what percent, understands that you have a cleanup job to do. And then there's this other part of the world that believes that the cleanup job was done by Bill Barr and Jeff Sessions, and that, the problem was Holder, Lynch, and Jim Comey, and that the cleanup job was done by the Honorable Bill Barr, and that the only problem is that you might be walking in to undo the cleanup job again. And they don't want to say that now because, you're a very respected appellate judge and you've got like lots of people who support you. But it makes it's one thing if they're lying and they know it, in their hearts they know that there's a cleanup job to be done. Maybe there's certain things they have to say, but actually they're not, won't mind so much if you spend some time doing the right thing. But if they really believe this, that they live in this alternate universe in which the last 4 years were the restoration of the Justice Department, there is no way to do your job that you are, that is going to be non-polarizing.
There is no way to do, but I think it's true either way. Look, you either can't convince them because they don't believe it because they have brain worms from Fox and the rest of right-wing media, and they live in this alternate universe, or the alternative is you won't convince them because they have an interest in not being convinced. Either way, the outcome is the same. There's no space to operate in which you're going to bring them along. I don't think it's different. I think even if they do really understand, they're not going to admit it because there's the political benefit to them is in not admitting the problems of the last 4 years and in not giving Garland any space. So I think you are facing the same political reality either way. So you just go forward, do what you think is the right thing, and try to roll over them.
Yeah. So I actually think it's funny. I was teaching intent the other day, and it's not like I'm teaching intent in a criminal law kind of context or whatever, but just like a general kind of mens rea type thing. And I was actually teaching it for adverse possession, and I was like talking about how there was a letter that the homeowner had, or not the homeowner, but the person who was adversely possessing had sent to the underlying homeowner, and asking to buy the piece of property that they had been adversely possessing. And there was just this the court was like, well, this is an unequivocal moment of them knowing that and this is them knowing that it's not their property, and therefore we're going to have a different set of rules. You said something, and so we can't be inside your head, and so we're going to take whatever it is that you said in this context, and we're going to that's what we're going to assume that you mean. And I kind of think that this would be a much, to your point, Matt, I think that this would be a much better way to deal with Republicans, instead of always assuming that they couldn't be that nefarious, or they couldn't be that stupid, or they couldn't actually believe that. Like, why can't we just completely believe them when they say these types of like things that we totally disagree with? Yeah, I mean, just I think that that's, yeah, I just think that that's very strongly like in kind of the camp that you're speaking of, and I think it's all about perception and communications.
Yeah, political power.
Yep, exactly.
Mr. Botts, the floor is yours.
Oh, you put in my drawings.
Wait,
oh, and
let's
Ted Cruz
see the
and his
background.
margarita.
Not today, Satan. Awesome.
Oh yeah, I made a drawing.
And
I
you
was
have
those
the,
are the mods that have been.
We've got Kate.
Yeah.
We've got Kate, and this is sort of a shared.
Yeah, we all
the
hate
Cruz
Ted Cruz.
margarita
We can all
is
share
somewhat
this.
shared, and then we've got the power bird
Yeah.
over here, which is
That
I'm
bird
loving
made
Beast
me
of the
really
Day.
happy.
Super into
All right.
it. Sorry.
Your question, sir.
all right. Well, if I can ask Kate a fun question after my serious question, I might have one more present. So, presuming that Judge Garland gets confirmed, what do you see as being the top 2 or 3 really important steps, or even new staffing decisions that he should take to restore the Department of Justice? And why is there not a hearing scheduled for Lisa Monaco yet?
So, dirty little secret, the Attorney General does not staff the Justice Department. The Justice Department...
Matt Miller does it. Sorry, just kidding.
It's staffed by the White House Personnel Office, and
Push-pull. There's
a
a conversation, yeah.
But it's you should not assume that all the people who come in as political appointees, particularly at the senior levels, are reflections necessarily of Garland's individual choices. That is why I thought it was particularly interesting that he went very energetically to bat today for Vanita Gupta and Kristen Clark. So this is, I'm leaving Lisa Monaco aside for now because they have, Monaco is not controversial, but Vanita Gupta and Kristen Clark are going to have rough confirmation hearings, I think, and Garland was very energetic in defense of them on the merits, and also in the insistence that they have expertise that he does not have, and that he needs them as part of a leadership team to be effective. And that was not stuff he needs to say in order to get confirmed. He is not somebody who would go energetically to bat for people who he was not actually interested in working with. And so I think the best way to understand that is to take it at face value without a lot of other stuff. As to the fact that there's no confirmation hearing scheduled for any of these people, the rumor is it's happening next week. It's outrageous that there's no, the idea that we're not going to have a hearing for the Deputy Attorney General until into March. That's crazy.
So it's crazy, but you can't do the Deputy Attorney General before the AG. The AG just happened today. So
yeah, why did the AG just happen today?
Not
on January 21st or 22nd.
Look, I know where you're going. It's not all Lindsey Graham's fault. A lot of it is he was nominated late, and he did, by the way, get his paperwork in a little late. So there is some culpability. But then Graham did delay it after that. But as a nominee, or as someone running as a nominee, your job is to not give them the ability to do that and get your paperwork in early. His paperwork was a little bit late. But yeah, I think the rest of them are going to be all next week together, 3rd or the 4th.
That's going to be some serious ass fireworks.
Yeah.
It's going to be,
look,
sorry, go ahead.
Republican senators know how to attack women of color on civil rights issues. They will not hold back the way they did against a 68-year-old white man, who's moderate and temperate, moderate in positions, moderate in record. It will be a much different dynamic.
and can I say there's an element of this that is legitimate and an element of it that is not, and I want to distinguish between the two. So, first of all, there is a tradition that dates back, it's really my entire adult lifetime. There has never been an uncontroversial nominee to head the Civil Rights Division. And the reason is that...
What about Hans von Spakovsky?
Yeah, exactly.
Totally normal.
Exactly. The reason is that the parties have radically different understandings about what that division should be doing and what it's for and what the essence of the law is about. I want to state that neutrally. I mean, I could state it the way I feel it, which is a little bit less neutral, but I think that is a fair statement with which nobody can disagree. It is also the case that, and so, when conservatives nominate somebody who's sort of close to their heart, that person is objectionable to a lot of liberals, and when liberals nominate somebody who reflects their sense of what that division should be doing, that person is likely to be objectionable to conservatives. It is also the case that the hearings are ugliest, as Matt says, when they involve women of color, and actually some men of color too. Matt will smile when I mention the name Bill Land Lee, but that was an ugly situation, and the history of this division being a lightning rod. And so here you have Kristen Clark, who, full disclosure, I think very highly of, and I like very much. And you also have Vanita Gupta, who used to run this division, right? And so you've got one who's being elevated to the associate position. You've got one who's, and they've both taken controversial positions in their lifetimes. And I think it's going to be ugly. And it's going to be, really ugly in ways that both reflect legitimate ideological differences and reflect things other than legitimate ideological differences. Is that fair, Matt?
Yeah, it's going to be great, except one thing, it's going to be great for Lisa Monaco. Lisa's barely going to get a question next week. She's going to have the easiest confirmation hearing.
Right, she's going to say national security,
yeah.
and they're
going to pounce on Vanita and Kristen.
Can I just, on a serious note on that, it's going to put Lisa in a very difficult position because she's going to be there as the white woman in national security while these two women of color are getting bashed by a bunch of older white men in a fashion that's going to be ugly, and she's probably not going to have a lot of questions directed to her. So how do you sort of show some solidarity when the questions are not directed at you? It's actually a very awkward situation.
Yeah.
Christopher Argyris, you get the last question today.
Oh,
Whoops.
muted.
But you're muted.
Oh.
Not anymore.
Okay, thank you. So I picked up on something, maybe I read too much into it. I'd like to see your guys' theories. So there was hardly a mention of Russia, at least by the Republicans in the hearing, but they seem to be determined to make the, quote, Chinese Communist Party a problem for the Biden administration. Do you see this as what about as a NatSec geopolitics edition saying, well, if the Democrats made Russia a problem for Trump, we're going to make China a problem for Biden? Or was this more of a subtler ploy to portray Democrats' so-called socialist agenda as a Chinese communist plot, and following along the lines of that, trying to tie Eric Swalwell to that Chinese spy in the Bay Area, or just throw out those theories and it was just something else entirely, or I'm reading it too much into this whole attempt to make a lot of the Garland hearing questions about the threat of China?
What do you think, Matt?
Yeah, I actually have a theory on this from some work I did on the transition. So in 2009, it became clear to us pretty early on that no matter what we did on terrorism issues, the Republican Party would always move further to the right. And so we could adopt policies that were George Bush administration policies, John McCain administration policies, and the new Republican Party would move to the right and criticize us from the right for being soft on terrorism because they had decided the political advantage lay there, and so they could never let us, not be to the right, but even be, equivalent to them on the issue of terrorism. I think the Republican Party has made a decision, and it's not like they got in a room and decided this. This is, it's organic. It's the way politics works. They've made a decision not to let that they are going to be to the right of the Democratic Party on China across the board, and that China was an issue that played well for President Trump. It's a place where they can try to cause some problems for Democrats, demand unreasonable things that they know Biden won't do, and so you're going to see this across the board criticism against the Biden administration, and you see it obviously against corporate America all the time. Republicans are now, attacking corporations for their activities in China. I think it's going to be one of the defining issues between congressional Republicans and the Biden administration, and that and it'll be China. And so it came up in the Garland hearing because it's going to come up in every nominee's hearing.
I just want to add to that. I think that's exactly right. I do think it was particularly visible in, what's her name, the senator from Tennessee, Marsha Blackburn's questioning. They need to fine tune, I think, the way they present it, because they some of the language she was using was perilously close to simple stereotyping of Chinese Americans, and
She's the worst.
I was pretty surprised by it. She always did include the words Communist Party in there, but there was a tone, or will you commit to go after Chinese people, in the way she was talking to him, that I thought was very uncomfortable, honestly. I do think the premise of Christopher's question is a little bit off. They asked about Russia all the time, actually. Yep. They just didn't ask about Russia. They asked about the investigation of Russia.
Yeah.
And so the oddity of what of Christopher's point is actually a little bit more acute than in his question. It's, when we're talking about Russia, we will only talk about the supposed missteps or overzealousness of the investigation, and when we are talking about China, we will say, like, why don't you have more scalps, basically. It's a very weird combination, and I do think Matt's diagnosis of it is correct, that the explanation is that they want to revive a kind of who lost China narrative, and always be unoutflankable on that.
I just want to say really quickly a funny story about Blackburn was when she was in the House. She was on she was the majority on the technology committee, and invited me because she thought that I was she thought that I was I don't know what she thought, but I had written a story about censors, an op-ed in the New York Times about censors and the internet, and she and her team had been so they invited me to speak as a majority witness, and I just got up there and read my entire thing into the record, and it was not what they wanted to hear. And then they started asking me questions, and I said not what they wanted to hear, and they literally just stopped calling on me. And so I sat there on my phone for the entire congressional hearing just texting people, because I was had nothing to do.
That's what congressional hearings are for. It's to catch up on your text.
It was really, I was just okay, well, glad we got that out of the way. Now you know.
So Matt, we're going to close with one prediction. How many Republican votes against confirmation of Merrick Garland are there in the committee and on the floor.
Oh, on the floor, I'll go backwards. Was it 10 and 10 on the committee right now? Is that the makeup, I think?
Yeah.
Well, you're going to get all the presidential caucus, Cruz, Cotton, Hawley. So there's 3. I'll say 4 on the committee and 25 on the floor.
Really?
He gets about 75 votes, yeah. Maybe a little more.
Wow. All right, I'm going to say 3 on the committee and 10 on the floor. I think he's going to get a bunch of the people that, like, I think he'll get Holly. Holly had a very polite set of exchanges with him, wasn't fixated on. I think he's going to split the presidential caucus, actually.
Go look at the Blinken vote, which was, he got 78 votes, and look at the 22. Look at the 22. Look at the 22 and see which of those you think are going to go for.
I think
for Garland.
There's a difference between Blinken and Garland, which is that everybody knows that any other Democratic possible nomination for Attorney General is less appealing from a Republican perspective than Merrick Garland. And there's a sense of that will move some of it. It won't move all of them. It won't cause unanimity because nothing does. But it will give some of them the, what are we going to incentivize here? We're going to end up with Doug Jones or Matt Miller. You're a great American.
Thank you.
It's good to see your face. It's good to see you back on Twitter, not
I like
doing
your impartial purple tie.
the dark art stuff.
Good. Good to see you both, Kate. Kate, congratulations on your big piece. I haven't talked to you since then.
Oh,
and
thanks.
I'm especially glad to see you because I thought after that big success you wouldn't slum it with Ben anymore. So
Oh
I'm
my God.
delighted to see you here.
Well, I can't. He's like
That's next
lice
week.
or something.
So, Kate, what do we have on tap for the rest of the week?
Yeah. Oh my gosh, we have such a good week. We kicked it off with Sarah and Matt, and now we have John McWhorter tomorrow. Then we have Jack Balkin returning, and he's going to be talking internet law with us and First Amendment law. And then Katie Engelhardt, who is the author of the forthcoming The Inevitable, recently wrote a really stunningly good op-ed in the New York Times about kind of how nursing homes have been dealing with dementia. She has been writing a book about the right to die for a long time, so that's going to be a fun show. But actually, Katie is amazing, and it is going to be really wonderful. And then we have Richard John returning to talk about communications.
The postal historian.
Returning to talk to us about the future of communications, and I think he has a new book coming out, so we'll talk to him about that.
That was one of the most surprising shows we have done.
He was so energetic.
Yeah,
he
you
was
think
like
a
amazing
historian
and
of the
smart
Postal
and
Service is going to be
and
boring
just so
as
good
hell.
at talking.
And that guy was just fabulous.
Yeah, he was.
All right. All of that will start 22 hours and 46 minutes from now. And until then, we don't have fun anymore, but we do have a forthcoming podcast on watching the French Village with Sarah Longwell, and I am excited about it. It's got Nazis, it's got the French Resistance, it's got planes strafing kids, which I'm really not into.
Super fun.
But yeah, I'm really excited about this project. We will see you tomorrow. Thanks, Matt.
Thanks.
Bye.